good day, folks. Welcome, everybody, to Pirkei Avos live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. After last week's checkmate knockout blow that he's thrown out to the public, I really think that people should be taking note of the show. He's been doing great stuff lately between Tanakh Talk, his show, Controversial Issues on Tanakh Talk. And like I said last week, he really threw this out there that when the Torah says that a Moabite cannot convert, a Moabite cannot convert, and yet King David's lineage through Ruth is within a Moabite. So the question that was proposed by Messianic was, that they don't listen to the oral Torah at all. So Rabbi has hit them with this checkmate. So how can King David be a Jewish and the Messiah come through King David as a Jewish Messiah, and how that connects? You can't answer that question out of Torah or Tanakh without the rabbis, and there it is. So it's a wham, bam, slam, checkmate against those that feel different on the matter. And I was just so excited. I've been pondering this all week, shared it with a few people, saw them scratch their head. It was exciting to know that Rabbi Coffman studied his position and he throw it out there, and yet he's got the answer from Torah and Tanakh. So let's just jump in the room with him. Rabbi Coffman, how are you doing today? It's always a joy to spend time with you, and I think we're moving on to chapter 1, Mishnah 14.
Yes, that's where we're holding. Hope everyone who celebrated Shavuos enjoyed. It's a lot of cheesecake and more cheesecake, and see how many different types of cheesecake you can make. I mean, it's also learning Torah, right? We stay up all night. The Energizer bunnies don't they don't sleep. They stay up all night. A little bit difficult with the mask on, but okay. We got to do what we got to do what we got to do. So there's a famous statement, as the Mishnah says, Mishnah 14. That famous statement by none other than King David himself, right? So, but if he wasn't a Jew, if he wasn't a Jew, then it really doesn't matter, right? It's, every time my kids see me, they look at me and it's like, I know, checkmate, right? So anyway, maybe we'll give an answer. Maybe we'll give an answer at the end. We'll see. But anyone who's a Karaite or a Messianic may not like it anyway, because they're just going to say, oh, it's the rabbis say this and the rabbis say that. Okay, but, when it comes to lineage, when it comes to the future Messiah and the fact that the non-Jews, right, the Christians have their quote-unquote Messiah to, there's a difference of opinion in the Gospels, exactly the lineage and how it goes, but they also go to King David, right? Regardless how messed up it is, they also go to King David. So if King David really, isn't a Jew, for them may not matter, but certainly for the future Jewish Messiah, no question, right? And that's throughout Tanakh and Ezekiel and Chronicles and all over the place, where it's clear future Messiah has to have a Davidic line, right? And he's got to have, and if he has a Davidic line, it comes through Ruth, and if she can't convert. Right, Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 4 doesn't have if a Moabite can never convert, then that's it, right? Then there's no future Messiah. So again, that was the checkmate. We'll see if maybe we'll hit that if I'm in a good mood. We'll see where we're holding at the end. So Mishnah 14, chapter 1, Mishnah 14. He used to say, right?
Hillel, was this from Hillel?
Right, this is Hillel. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Right? And if I don't merit for myself, who's going to merit for me? So this is a pretty loaded statement. You look at the beginning, it says, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Right? Sounds in a certain way. Well, if I'm here, everybody's here. Right? Don't we see that from, we see that also the Talmud tells me. Right? But if I'm not for myself, you have to have self-esteem, right? If I don't stand up for myself, who's going to stand up for me? So we learn over here that a person has to work hard to learn, right? They have to learn as much as they can, work on their character traits, and reach their potential, right? Now, we don't know what our potential is. We've spoken about potential, a number of times. We'll see it, I think, in a little different way today. But the bottom line is, if they don't put in the effort, who's going to put it in for them? In other words, if I'm not for myself, well, what's going to be? If I don't put in the effort, you're not going to end up as anything, right? It's not going to come to you by osmosis. I remember when I first started learning, right? There was a guy walking around the yeshiva with a tractated Talmud on his head, right? Trying to balance it. He's walking around. So I said, "What are you doing?" So he said, "I wanted to enter through osmosis." Right? I want the Gemara to enter. And I was like, yeah, sit down, start to learn, right? That's the only way it's going to go. You have to put in, the effort. Now, the problem is you could have someone, let's say, very bright, right? Doesn't have to work that hard. Other people have to fight, for their Torah because maybe they're not as bright. So they have to put concepts together and try and understand what the arguments are and what's going on. Someone else could just get it like this, 1, 2, 3. Doesn't really put in the effort, right? Doesn't mean he's not going to understand, but imagine how much more he could understand if he actually really put in the effort, right? So that's one explanation. If I'm not for myself, I don't put the effort in, then I'm not going to become anything, right? It's not going to be that if I don't do anything, then my learning, I'm not gonna accomplish anything, right? And you have to have what we'll call that, intestinal fortitude, right? You have to have what we call ratzon. You have to have the desire, inside. And I get this question quite a bit that, how do I keep that fire lit? How do I, even though I understand according to my mind, right? Maybe in my heart also, I understand the Torah is true and I want to keep it. But how long does it take a person even to understand that the Torah is true? It takes them a while to get to that point. How many times have I heard the story that, if someone grew up in Christianity and they say, listen, I've been learning this stuff, or I've been taught this stuff for 40 years. You really think the church is lying? Well, guess what? That's why you don't question, right? That's exactly why a person's not going to question, because of course, they've been fed a bunch of bones, right? So therefore, for someone to come to the truth, what's the hardest aspect for a non-Jew, for a Christian to come to the truth, is that they're afraid they're going to fry in hell forever, right? In other words, if they don't believe in JC, right, it's what we call the JC syndrome. You don't believe in him, that's it. So that's the hardest thing, because God forbid, what if he's right? Right? What if the Christian's right? Right? So the last thing people look at, if they start to have questions, they'll start to look at Rabbi Singer's webpage. They'll start maybe going through, quote unquote, the real sources and understanding the Jewish perspective. But that's only almost as a last resort, because obviously if they leave where they are, then they're going to be ostracized, right? I had somebody that still in Noahide. They live in the middle of nowhere. I mean, really in the middle of nowhere in Texas. Population 3,000, talking about the middle of nowhere. And when he left Christianity, his family left Christianity, so they stuck out like sore thumbs, because the most important institution where he lives, guess what, is a bar. No, I'm just kidding. Is the church, right? That goes hand in hand, right? So it was with the church. So when he left the church, no social gatherings. No, that's where all the social activity is. And even though, his kids had a difficult time, in school, they weren't moving. They wasn't interested in moving, but they, stuck out and probably still, stick out, like a sore thumb. But some people will hold on to the lie because they don't want the alternative, right? What's the alternative? The alternative is truth. Actually, we had a discussion one of my meals, but how can people still believe in evolution? Right, from a hydra to a paramecium to a butterfly, and I told the story. I told the story that I went to when I went to university. So I had to take 4 semesters of a science. So I'm not really scientifically inclined. So I took a sociology class. I took a few classes just to get out of the science requirement. So one of the classes that was really a joke class, even though it was an Ivy League school, was history and development of science. So what's history and development of science? Evolution, right? Evolution. So the professor gets up the first day, and the professor says, when you go to the zoo, when you go to the zoo and you see a chimpanzee, right, and you see a gorilla, he says, you're looking at your cousin right in the face. I'm like, I don't know who's in your family, but I don't look like a chimp. It could be I don't trim my beard so much, whatever. But, so, it's funny in all of academia. Like, if you don't believe in evolution, you're like square. You're not even, it's like you're not even human, because what's the alternative, right? The alternative is that the Bible must be true. I mean, if anyone's ever read A Brief History in Time by, probably the greatest physicist of this generation, Stephen Hawking. All right, he's a tremendous heretic as well. But he proved throughout the book, that there's a expanding universe. If there's an expanding universe, what does that show? There must be a creator, somebody who started it, and someone who's watching it, right? Someone who's on top of it. So if that's true, it looks like, quote unquote, said Stephen Hawking, right? He said it must be that the creationists are right. So he said, forget everything I wrote in this book. And in the end, he says, you should just trash it, but the creationists can't be right. But it wasn't based on logic, right? It wasn't based on physics. It was based on cognitive dissonance. I can't say that, even though I prove the opposite. Why should I ever say that, right? That's a problem. But if you think about it, okay, so you go back to the Torah, right? And the Torah says, created animals, whatever. And I have to go to oral tradition. Oral tradition says, when God said, create the creepy crawly things, they didn't grow in stages, right? Actually, probably the Messianics and the Karaites will be happy, because you take that literally, right? When God said, let there be man, was he an infant when God created man? No. He created man from the dust of the four corners of the earth. So how was man formed into a little ball, like a little child? I don't think so, right? It's created in full form, right? Totally created in full form. Animals also created in full form. I remember there was Nachmanides, right? When he speaks about the fact that God breathed into the soul of man. It could be, in one way to look at what he says, it could be, what was man without the soul? Maybe you're talking about Cro-Magnon man, maybe you're talking about other forms of man or whatever, but obviously you couldn't learn that, because obviously there was no man before he had a soul, right? So when you look at it in that sense, right, not only does it not make sense according to what the Torah says, right? Even if you forget what the Torah says, we're not even going to go into that, but they've never proven or shown a missing link. The last missing link I remember in the mid 90s was a skull fragment and a jawbone. That was about it. Now, if you read the book Genesis and the Big Bang by Dr. Gerald Schroeder, right, he says, just while I'm on this topic, he says that the difference between man and monkey is 1% difference. Good book. There we go. We'll give him a plug. Right? So he says the difference between man and monkey DNA is 1%. There's a 1% difference, right, in the DNA. So he says, according to physics, they're created on the fifth day, and the fifth day is whatever, let's say, according to them, is 10 billion years, or whatever. If you take the monkey in a mutation every single second, right, of that 10 billion years, he's still not going to come to be a human. So according to him, and he's a physicist, right? Big time physicist, MIT, right? My hometown of Boston, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Anyone wants to Google it, right? Tremendous place. So the physics, he says you don't have enough time. Even if you tell me it's 10 billion years, 20 billion years, 40 billion years, he said you don't have enough time mathematically. Mathematically, it doesn't work, right? Not only that, they haven't found the missing link. That's 1% difference. That's not the same as a hydrant to a paramecium to a creepy crawly thing to a small animal to a big animal. You don't have enough time, right? It's kind of like, Star Trek is like, come on, Scotty, we need to go to warp 3 in about 35 seconds. Like, come on, Captain, I only have one engine. It's like, Scotty, just get us out of here, right? We don't have any proof, right? There is no proof. But all of academia holds by it. All of academia swears by it, because there's only one other alternative. The only other alternative that we have is creation according to the Bible. And that, God forbid, we don't think it's only faked and all this, but they've never shown or proven a missing link, right? Even if you want to say it's like this and it's like that, it's like the other thing, you don't have a missing link, right? They haven't proven it, they'll never prove it because there's no such thing. In any case, God gave us a brain. He gave us the ability to think, right? And it's really funny because people say, oh, you're so close-minded, this and that. Evolution doesn't make sense logically, right? Sorry, scientifically. Doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't work and it's never been proven, right? But all of academia swears by it. So a person has to think, right? One explanation, got to put in the effort. No one's going to put in the effort for you. Oh, so the point I wanted to get at is, how is it possible? How is it possible that, yeah, we have to put in the effort and it's difficult. Life is difficult. Learning Torah is hard, right? I don't think there's any question about it, right? Nonetheless, you have to have that, you have to have that candle lit. You have to have that, I guess we'll call it, for lack of a better term, right? You need that Energizer Bunny mentality that it's the most important thing, I'll ever do in my life, and it's all about sustaining the universe. What I do about learning Torah, right? But again, so why don't people think in those terms? Because we get beaten down. We get beaten down in life. We got bills to pay, other things to do, right? Sickness. We're all, people in quarantine, and people afraid of death, and all these other things, right? That's just what we're going through now, right? But in general, a person still has to have it lit inside of them, right? In other words, we spoke last week about the fact that if a person doesn't learn, he's liable for the death penalty. That's a pretty scary thought. So we'll cut some Noahides a little bit of slack. Being a Jew is all inclusive. If you're in this world, right, you're in this world to strive. You're in this world to be the best Jew or non-Jew you can be. There's no days off. Because you're going to tell me, oh, it's doom and gloom. Like, why can't you just take a walk and smell the roses? Well, you can do that also, right? But, that doesn't come at the expense of when I'm supposed to learn. There's a great story. I told over a good story about the importance of learning Torah. Rabbi Margoliath, Zecher Tzadik Levrachim, his name be blessed, one of the Torah giants of the last generation, was a big businessman. And he is also a tremendous, tremendous rabbinic scholar. And he told his wife, no matter what happens, I'm learning, I'm going to be locked up in my room, 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning till 2. During that time, I'm not seeing anybody, no phone calls, nothing. So fine. So one day comes a few merchants. Few merchants come in. They want to speak to him. And his wife says he can't see anyone until after 2. So listen, we have a short leash over here, a short amount of time. Right? Your husband is going to make tens of thousands of rubles. He's going to make a ton of money in 10 minutes. Obviously, he didn't mean that. He couldn't have meant that, because if he's going to make all this money, right, he doesn't really have to do anything. Right? Just has to give an okay or whatever. He's going to make all this money. All he needs is 10 minutes. His wife said no. And they kept chattering back and forth. And they left. Comes 2 o'clock, comes out of his room. His wife tells him the story, and Rabbi Margoliath is jumping up and down, whistling Dixie. Right? I don't even know how to whistle Dixie. He's like, whatever, he's dancing. He's dancing. Right? Why is he dancing? He says, look how valuable my Torah learning is in God's eyes. He says, I lock myself in my room till 2 o'clock. I think, you're sustaining the world. Look what you're doing. You're learning God's law. All these important things, and God thinks it's worth $10,000. He thinks it's worth $1 million. He thinks my learning is worth that much. Now, it's an amazing story if you think about the importance of Torah, because a person learns however much time they allocate to the day or whatever. They have fixed times of learning. Right? We saw at the very beginning, what is one of the things that uphold the world is Torah. Right? We believe learning Torah upholds the world. Now the question is, do we really believe it? Right? But if you see something like this, look, he could have, maybe could have retired. Could have made so much money, could have retired. But obviously, he knew what's more important. Right? Learning Torah is much more important than making money. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to provide for your family. Right? When a person has fixed times to learn, unless God forbid your house is on fire, or something happens, someone's sick, there's an emergency, it's one thing. right? But that's it's part of the evil inclination also, right? Any minor thing that may sound important or whatever, but the reality is it's probably not as important. And then if you have a fixed time to learn, you don't just shut your book and go out. I mean, obviously it depends what it is, right? But that's the work of the evil inclination, right? You can find the evil inclination even in the study hall because people get distracted, speak about politics, speak about this pandemic, speak about other things, and waste time when they should be learning. We saw last week the Chaim, right? They wanted him to dedicate a certain amount of time to learning for the Rosh Hashiva of Naphtali Trop. So may his name be blessed. That he should get better. So the Chaim dedicated 1 minute. So someone close to the Chaim said 1 minute. You only dedicated 1 minute. Someone's dedicating an hour. Someone's dedicating 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. But he wanted to show how important 1 minute is, right? Because the reality is, a person can say 200 words, 250 words. Maybe if I speak fast enough, say 300 words, whatever it is. In a minute, every word you say, you're getting a mitzvah for learning Torah. They wanted to show the importance of 1 second. So that is one explanation. You have to put in the effort. Another explanation is that who's going to rebuke me or inspire me to change? Right? In other words, it says if I'm not for myself, who's going to be for me? So who's going to inspire me? Right? You can listen to great speakers and they speak like fire and you're going to fry in hell and if you don't do this and whatever, right? You got great speakers that can inspire. But how long, screamers, right? How long is that going to last? Right? It's good for the moment, right? It might be good for 10 minutes. Maybe it's good for longer, but in the end, it's only good for a small amount of time. So therefore, a person has to work on themselves daily to add to their service to God, work on their thoughts, perfect their actions. Perfecting their actions, I would think, is a little bit easier, right? Wanting to change and, to be better, to do more mitzvahs, whatever it is, to change the way you think, that's a whole different ballgame, right? And that is part of what I do, my conversion classes and other classes as well, is to show what the Torah is, meaning what it means, how it applies to us, and how to think like a Jew, right? See, someone coming out of Christianity, they'll be terrified to ask questions. Judaism's all about questions. Now, you may not like the answer, right? Some, this messianic troll doesn't like any of the answers because it's revolving around oral law. Well, okay, that's what we have. But we showed there are at least 6, I gave 6 examples. I give 100 examples, right, of what the Torah says, and there are no parameters, right? Don't steal, don't kill. There are no parameters. What does that mean? Right? It's euthanasia murder, right? Mercy killing. If someone's already in a hospice and I pull the plug, he's already going to die. He's already dead. He's just lacking burial. Is that murder? No definition, right? You need a definition and all these things that you'll be able to pass down, to the next generation, right? So here, a person can be inspired by others, right? There are great speakers out there that they can, they can bring about the masses. They can, speak tremendously, inspire others, but they themselves have to have the intestinal fortitude to arouse in themselves the ability to change, right? And want to be a better person. Comes on the Rambam. Maimonides says, okay, he's a man. We'll take him what he says. Brings down the laws of repentance. And the laws of repentance, he says, when a person comes to Yom Kippur, right, the holiday of Yom Kippur, he's got to confess, right? The question is confession a different aspect of the mitzvah of tshuva, of repentance, or it's part of the same? The difference of opinion between the Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah, whether it's all part of the same mitzvah or not, really doesn't matter. But according to the Rambam states clear, all I have to say on the Torah level is I have sinned. That's it. Everything else is extra. Right? Now you ask, okay, according to the Rambam, why? Why is that the minimum? We want to always do extra things. Why is that the minimum? Because it's very hard for a person to admit they've done something wrong. In other words, they could justify it in many, many different ways. But to admit, yes, I have done something wrong. I am accountable for what I have done. That a person doesn't want to do, right? In other words, you got your hand stuck in the cookie jar. You got 10 reasons why your hand's stuck there and why it's okay, right? You'll come with all kinds of different scenarios. But at the end of the day, you got caught. So if you got caught, right, at least admit you've done something wrong. Now, many years ago, I think I mentioned the story before, but all good stories bear repeating. A number of years ago, someone got caught, whatever, it's an Orthodox Jew, got caught money laundering. And I came out and said I was very happy to see the person admitted he did something wrong. I didn't say what he did was right. That's what I said. I got hammered, blogs, anonymous, this, that, all over the place. So they wanted me to, to justify what this person did. And they're hucking me and this and that and whatever. So finally they put me in a corner. They put me in a corner and they say, we want you to explain why this Orthodox Jew, money laundered. So I said, I'm going to disappoint everybody and I'm not answering for him because I'm going to have enough time after 120 years answering for myself. There's no way I'm going to answer for someone else. That's it. And they said, oh, what a coward, what this. I was like, he's going to answer. Ask him. I could come up with 100 reasons why he might have done it. All of them may be true. None of them may be true. Well, who cares? A person did something wrong. He got caught. Right? It's against the law. You're not allowed to money launder. Maybe he wanted to save money on taxes. Could be. Maybe other reasons. Could have been a whole bunch of reasons. The reasons are irrelevant. But the only point I made, and let's make clear, the only point was I was happy he admitted what he did was wrong. Because not everyone would be willing to do that. Right? They'll say, I did it, okay, but the person deserved it, and this, and, that's not enough. You got to say, I did something wrong. Right? That, and for a person to do that's a very hard thing. Right? Because no one ever wants to admit they've done something wrong because then they're embarrassed. Right? Then they have to admit there are repercussions for your actions. Then they may say, well, there are other aspects of your life that, a lot of times, people can lead double lives and do other things and whatever and still claim, they dress the dress, they walk the walk, they talk the talk, but they're hollow inside, right? They're only doing it just for externals. Right, but that being the case, says the Rambam, at least you have to admit you've done something wrong. Okay, the other stuff you should do also, but this is the bare minimum to say that you're. Not only that, you have to do it in front of God. Right, not enough just to say it to yourself. Right, saying it to yourself. Normally we say words in a person's heart don't mean anything. When you actualize something, that has an effect. Right, we spoke that someone asked my Rabbi, they're going, they're losing faith, in God because of everything that's going on with this pandemic and the damage it's caused and all these other things, and they wanted advice like how to work on their faith and belief in God. So he answered a number of times during the day. Doesn't matter when you do it, right? But a number of times during the day, your mantra shall be, God is in charge and God runs the world. You want to try and understand it? Forget it. You're never going to understand it in 10 lifetimes, right? But at the end of the day, you acknowledge, not just in your mind. In your mind's not enough, right? You have to acknowledge that God's the one who's in charge. God is the one in charge. So the Rabbi tells the story, of a great rabbi that was learning on his lectern. When he was learning, and he could learn for hours on end, and unbelievable intellectual mind. And on the lectern it says, Shavisi Hashem Kenegdi Tamid. Right? Never wanted to forget God is in front of me always. So someone asked him, a student asked him. They said, as great as you are in learning, why do you have this statement in front of your lectern? Like, how could you ever forget, that, God's in charge and that, God's always in front of me? So he said very simple. He said, I'm so into learning. I could learn for hours on end and take from here and take from there and, whatever. I want to make sure I'm not doing it like an intelligent student. I'm not doing it just for mental gymnastics. My Rabbi's Rabbi Moshe Schneider, Zecher Tzadik Devrocha, may his name be blessed, would say to his students, I don't want you to learn like a frummer student, like an ultra-Orthodox student. It's not mathematics, right? It's not science. It's not another discipline. This is life, right? You have to take it to heart. You have to, it's serious business, right? So therefore, in this case, someone can get truly inspired, but it has to come from you, right? It has to come from within, right? It can't be just, Rabbi, that was a great lecture. Listen to another one. Oh, that was a great lecture. That's beautiful, but it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't resonate in the sense that it's going to make you change. There's some people very good at making a person feel like a piece of dirt, right? In order that they should have proper fear of heaven. That's also true. You need fear of heaven. That's the base of serving God 100%, but you need love of God also. It can't be just, I'm going to do this because I'm afraid I'm going to fry in hell forever, right? Someone asked me recently, what are the different levels of hell? What are their names? I'm like, what do you care? Like, who cares what the names are? And what do you care if you know them? And that, if you desecrate Shabbos on purpose, you're going to be in like the 5th level or the 7th level, right? The 7th level. It's got this name. Make you feel better? Now you're whistling Dixie. Oh, that's it. I know the name. Forget about it. Why forget about it? Because that's not going to bring you to tshuva. That's not going to bring you to repentance. You're going to say, oh, I'm stuck in that level. I can never get out. It's impossible. So people get butchered. And when they get butchered, what happens? They say, why should I bother doing anything? Right? Right? Because if I can't get out anyway, what's the point? Yeah. Now there are speakers that use this type of, terminology. And for the people that, enjoy listening to that, you have to understand where it comes from and what the purpose is, and all that. It may be a successful way to do it, but what about people get broken by it? If people get broken, I've been in contact with a number of people who got broken by it, right? So I told them, don't listen. You don't have an obligation with this person. No, he's really good and this. But if you're going to get broken by it, you're not going to do anything, right? Fear of heaven's important. I agree. It's the base. It's the base of serving God, 100%. But if you're going to live that life, and you're going to take that to heart, you'll never get out of bed, right? Like my Rabbi says, if you live in the past, you have no future. Doesn't mean you whitewash the past. It doesn't mean you say, just because, that happened and this happened, the other thing happened, who cares? I'm just going to go on with life. You can't do that. You got to take some of it to heart, but the point is, if you dwell on it too much, you cannot change. You will not change because you're going to say, I'm too bad, it's too hard, it's, any number of things where a person not even get up to bat, right? He's not even going to try because he's already got knocked down. And he says, and this is the way of the evil inclination. For converts, anyone who wants to convert, the evil inclination comes at you with tenacity. Unbelievable tenacity. Oh, you really think the Jewish people are going to accept you? You're going to move into a Jewish community. They're going to put you on a higher pedestal. They're going to treat you like a second-class citizen. They'll barely let you into their schools, into their homes. They think you got spiritual cooties. All these things. It may all be true. It may all be true. But at the end of the day, I tell people you have to have very broad shoulders. You have to kick the evil inclination in the head. Because at the end of the day, only the very few survive. And even the few that survive, people can get broken by what people say. Now, obviously people have to be careful, right? So, certainly speaking against the convert or a potential convert, there are many, many prohibitions. Tremendous amount of prohibitions in one shot. Someone will say everybody transgresses. All right, I don't want to say everybody. Right? Are there a lot of people that may make fun of converts and say things they shouldn't say? Yeah, so what? The Torah says that you're not allowed to. Right? It says it more than 30 times. You're not allowed. So people do things. It doesn't mean it's right. Could be rabbis saying it also. Could they, God forbid, speak Lashon Hara? 100%. Right? What a Torah prohibition is, you're never allowed to remind the convert of where they've been. Say, hey, I remember you before you were Jewish. I remember you, when you were worshiping voodoo, when you were eating, you were eating shrimp and you loved it.
At a CFL game.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, so I was gonna say I love CFL. They're lying, that's for sure, right? But in general, doing that's a total prohibition, right? Even a secular Jew that became an Orthodox Jew, reminding them of where they came from, is totally forbidden, right? It's called onus devarim. You're not allowed to remind someone, where they came from. If it's gonna be something negative, right? So, so over here, a person has to know, learning Musar, ethics, rebuke, that's all good. And you have to take a certain level, you have to take it to heart. Because you have to realize we're going to see what we're doing is like not even a drop in the bucket, what we're obligated to do. Right? So a person can say, wow, it's so hard, and it's so difficult. I'm never going to get there and whatever. And they beat themselves down and they're finished. Right? They won't even get up to bat. It's just, if you live that mentality, the evil inclination will destroy you, will absolutely destroy you. And I remember when I was, all of 19, a few years ago, and someone said, oh, you do this, but you don't do that. Oh, you compromise on this. What's the first knee-jerk reaction? You want to slug them and say, what do you know? You don't even read Hebrew. You don't know anything, right? And, you go off on them and say, who are you to say anything? But the reality is they're right. Because if you pick and choose, right, like these Messianics do, they pick and choose. So you have to say, so what's the answer? So what's the better answer? Better answer is, I really should be doing this and this, right? But I'm a work in progress, right? They can't hammer you for that. Because if a person admits they're weak and they need to learn and they need to grow and they're going to go in that process, then what can they say? They can say, oh, yeah, we'll see if he gets there or whatever. But that's a much better answer than a knee-jerk reaction because you're going to say, I'm a work in progress, right? Someone who's a work in progress admits they have failures. They make mistakes, right? They certainly make mistakes. We don't want to. Right? But if someone's on that path and they start out and they keep part of Shabbos and the other part of Shabbos they don't, and they don't make blessings and they do this and do other things, and it's not consistent, it's very easy to be called on, right? And a person gets flustered and say, who are you? You're nobody. What are you calling me? My spiritual goals and my drives, and who are you to say anything? But deep down, they're right. Right? Deep down, person's inconsistent. And I learned this at a relatively young age, that consistency is extremely important, right? But the answer is going to be that, instead of giving a knee-jerk reaction, even though, we're upset and we want to, take my Louisville Slugger and hit them upside the head, the answer is going to be, I'm a work in progress. When you admit you're a work in progress, they may still hammer you, right? But it's not going to be the same. They'll say, you're right, I'm inconsistent, right? And I'm hoping to get to this level. And that's what I'm going to work at. So that already takes it down a few different levels. If they still hammer you, they hammer you, right? But at least they have to show a certain level of respect. At least, you want to go in this direction. Now, they may think, it's a phase. They'll get over it. I think people, at least in my own family, have given up on me. They know it's not a stage anymore, right? It's, 30 years later, right? So they know it's definitely not a stage. They see, how my kids have grown up, and who they've married and what they're doing. Okay, maybe we've all been brainwashed, could be, but at the end of the day, you believe it, you live it, right? So that is the first part of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah says, what does it mean if I am for myself, what am I? So I would say if I'm for myself, I'm selfish. What about everybody else? Don't I have an obligation to do chesed, do acts of loving kindness? So even if a person's for themselves, they want to help himself. Why is there any merit? Why in the world should there be any merit over here? Because the reality is, it doesn't help anyone, right? Even a person would give rebuke to others And in turn, they would rebuke themselves. Like I'm always fond of saying, I love what I say. Question is, do I listen to myself? Right? It's like, wow, if I would listen to half the things I'd say, I'd probably look different. Probably would be different. Right? But at the end of the day, even if we would rebuke ourselves, they're still only doing 1/1000th of what they're obligated to do. So they give a parable. Which is compared to a king that gives his field to workers, and he tells them, I want you to harvest 30 bushels a year. Now, they work very hard, right? For an entire year. They're working on this land. They only produce 15. They work like dogs, year in and year, the entire year. They work very hard. They only bring 15 bushels. Comes along the king after a year. He says, I don't understand. I gave you a command. The command was 30 bushels. Where are the 30 bushels? So they answered him, our master, the king, the field you gave us was the worst imaginable. Right? It was full of thorns and thistles, and you gave us grade C, right? Grade F field, right? You're lucky you even got 15 bushels. He says we worked very hard, and that's all we could bring out, right? We only brought out half. So this is what a person's going to say in front of God. What are we going to say? We're going to say the evil inclination that you gave us from our youth is evil. Right? Doesn't the Torah tell me? Right? Can't be happy here. Genesis chapter 8, verse 21. Inclination of your heart is evil from your youth. Right? If it's evil from your youth, no matter what we do, can we really accomplish what God wants? Right? It's very hard because we're at a disadvantage. So you say, well, God's going to cut us some slack. He knows that. He created us. We have the evil inclination from within. Adam and Eve ate from the tree, even though God didn't want them to. Fine. So if we are just an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust, we have the soul that comes from above. We should really want to go in the right path and the right way, but we're stuck in this world. So what can God expect? What does God want? Comes along King David, right? King David says, Psalms chapter 130, verse 14, for he knew our nature. He is mindful that we are dust. We're dust. We are dust, right? Our evil inclination, tremendous amount of power, preventing us from doing mitzvahs, right? But let's say it didn't have that power. Let's say it was weak. The evil inclination wasn't as strong. How much would we really accomplish in serving God? So what's the parable here? This is compared to the weak field, right? A person's going to get up and say, God, what do you want from me? You only gave me my soul with the evil inclination. I can only hit $150, right? What can I do? Right? I'm a shortstop. I hit $150. $150, you can't expect more than that, right? Mark Belanger, right? Great shortstop, non-hitter, right? Definitely a non-hitter, like most shortstops. Okay, won't get into Cal Ripken and others, right? Who did all right. But if he's hitting $150, he's gonna be sitting on the bench unless he's unbelievable shortstop, right? If he's a great defensive shortstop, okay, they'll play him anyway.
Golden Gloves.
They'll just bat him last. So good. So we're compared, according to this parable, we're compared to a weak field. And therefore, what could you expect? We got thistles and bristles and all kinds of different things. It's like you're starting at a deficit, right? A total deficit, right? This is also what it means when someone awakens you a spiritual, my language, a spiritual oomph, right? In other words, they give you something that, rings the bell, that really now your soul is on fire, your soul is lit, it's awakened in yourself. So it comes on the Mishnah says, love not for me, who's going to be for me? If I'm not going to work hard and awaken in myself to do God's will, then what am I? Right? I'm going to be empty. Right? I'm not going to do anything because I don't have the will. Right? And people are very weak today. They'll say, okay, I do what I can do. I'm not going to do more than that. Right? That's called the third and long. That means, right, or a punt in my language, that means that they're just not going to do anything because they're going to claim it's too hard. They're going to say, what can I do? And I've heard this a number of times. People will say, this is who I am, deal with it. So that means that, first of all, your relationship's not worth anything because they're not willing to change, right? So then, okay, so what do? Person's not willing to change. You're being treated like a piece of dirt, so you can make a decision, right? How many people have told me blood is thicker than water? Yeah. So what? So family's important, okay. But if you don't make any effort, you don't have anything in common, you treat someone like a piece of dirt, why in the world would you think there's going to be an upkeep in a relationship? Because there's family. That's what family does. I don't know, a person can make a decision. You don't have anything in common. All they do is make fun of you, let's say. You don't have nothing really to talk about. It's just that you're getting put down. So what do you need it for? You say, oh, but family's so important. Like at some point, the person has to say, how much is this relationship, worth it? So over here, if I don't do anything, I don't awaken in myself. So what happens? Then I don't do anything, right? I'm only going to attain a little of what God wants for me, but you could take it another way. You could say, even if I work very hard, right? Even if I work very hard, how much am I going to accomplish? So you can have a defeatist attitude. You can say, listen, you only gave me with certain, certain things, certain character traits. I don't have a great mind. I don't like to review. I'm lazy, different things. It's like, reminds me of the story before I went to university. I kept getting called by the Army, and they kept, telling me what I could do and scholarships and this and that. So finally I told them, after a whole bunch of times, listen, I'm undisciplined. I'm overweight. I don't listen to authority. And they're like, we love people like you. I'm like, nah, I'm already signed somewhere else. I was like, sorry. So, if a person doesn't work hard, right? So if a person doesn't work hard, what are they going to attain? Now you might take it the other way. Even if a person does work hard, right? If a person does work hard, what are they going to attain? Right? Really, what we're doing is a tip of the iceberg, right? It's a drop in the bucket, when we think about it. But at the end of the day, what does God want? He wants you to strive, right? Give an example. Give an example. Most people know cursing is bad, right? They certainly don't want to curse in front of their kids. Some people will do it in front of their kids anyway. Whatever it is, you ask most people, they'll say cursing's a bad thing. Okay, so let's say a person comes to this revelation, and they understand cursing's bad. So what do? They take a half an hour every day. A half an hour every day, 9 to 9:30 in the morning. They say, whatever happens, I am not going to curse. So after a while, they say, wow, I'm really working on myself. Then they take an hour, right? Let's say an hour a day, whatever happens, right? Then all of a sudden, they hear people at work that curse. It's like, oh, what scum of the earth? I can't believe it. Look how they talk. They talk like a truck driver. And 2 weeks ago, you did the same thing. What happened? You now have a sensitivity, a tremendous sensitivity. Now, the more you act, now imagine speaking Lashon Hara, speaking badly against others. You work on that for a certain amount of time. When you hear people speak and you understand that the speech is forbidden and what they do, it turns a person on their head and they say, look what I've learned. Look how, how important this is. Look how holy this is. Now, getting back to cursing, now imagine, a person's building, right? They're building something, right hammer, left thumb, whap, right? They hit their left thumb. During this time, he's not supposed to curse. So he's about to say every 4-letter word in the book. He doesn't say anything, right? He screams in pain, but that's it. Doesn't say anything. Now, that's a tremendous thing, right? That means you're in control. You're in control of your emotions. Now, that being said, that's a tremendous level. But then you ask them, I said, okay, that is beautiful, right? You're working, you're striving, you have sensitivity, even when it's hard. Now, how many 4-letter words did you think about? They're like, 5, right? They say 5. I thought of 5 4-letter words. Okay. Or more than 5, whatever it is. More than 5-letter words. So now I say, well, what's the point? Well, the point is you work tremendously, on yourself not to say it. Another level to work on is not to think it. No, you're going to say, come on, is that possible? If a person works on things step by step, you're not doing this overnight. You do this step by step. You have a sensitivity. If you have a sensitivity and you have people around you have the same sensitivity, right, that's much easier to work on. If you're living in the middle of nowhere and people talk the way they are and do whatever they do, they don't have the sensitivity. So you don't bring up that if someone is cursing, you're not going to say, can you not do that? That's, kind of disgusting in God's eyes. They'll laugh at you, right? But you have to have the sensitivity to say, it's not going to affect me. You're going to move on. You think about other things, think about Torah thoughts, and that's how a person grows. Because, it cannot be something that is going to last. It's not going to be an overnight thing. People, when they look at the conversion process or even, learning what it means to be a Noahide, they think it's like, okay, I got to start, everything. If you start everything, say, okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on the other thing. It's over. Yeah. Right? That's what the evil, right. That's it's what the evil inclination wants. You're running towards this, running towards that. This, and all these different things doesn't work. Right? It doesn't work because the person can only take in, so much. So, at this point also a person can say, well, if I'm only doing a little bit, then what's the point? We see that even if a person does a little bit, obviously, we're talking a lot more than this, but even, I just want to point out, even if someone takes on something small, something very small to fix, and they work on that day in and day out, over time, they will have the sensitivity, right? 100%, they're going to have the sensitivity. They won't be the same person. Imagine a few years go by. They've been working on this. They've been learning, the laws of Lashon Hara, 2 laws a day, not to speak Lashon Hara, not to speak badly against others. Great. Over time, right? I use 2 years as an example. After 2 years, you're going to have tremendous sensitivity, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but the more a person works at it, right? Obviously, the more they're going to get out of it, the more they're going to see they're growing, because they're going to say, come on, it's too hard. It's like a mountain. I can't climb up. No, you take it step by step. Something like that, you master to a certain extent. Okay, you work on that and you work on something else. And, but you take small steps. When you take small steps, then there are things that you can do. Yeah.
Rabbi,
One second. So if you take small steps and things that you can do, then a person sees a sense of accomplishment. When you see a sense of accomplishment, okay, so it'll give you a little bit of pat on the back, make you feel good, etc. But it gives you the oomph to continue, and to say, listen, I can do this. I got this. I can take on something else a little bit, work on that, gather that sensitivity, and you say, wow, it's something really, it's relatively small. Right, we're not talking about big things, but even if it's something small, look what you can gain by it. Yeah, question.
Well, yeah, Rabbi, I understand that little by little, you'll get somewhere and make steady advancements. My question has to do with over aiming. People not knowing their limitations. No offense to anybody, but if they got 100 IQ and they want to be a brain surgeon, right? There's got to be limits. But a lot of people get personally condemned because of this impossible standard that gets into their mind that they think they got to live up to, and they'll never get to it but that's I think part of the evil inclination.
Right, but the thing is that a person has to have goals. Right, you certainly have to have goals, but the most important thing when you make goals, right, is as brought down by Yom Kippur. What do? We take on things that we want to change. So one of the great rabbis of the last generation, Rav Shalom Shadron, Zecher Tzadik L'Vrach, may his name be blessed, would say, you want to take on something small, and then cut it in half. In other words, make sure it's something you can do.
Right.
When we say tafasta maruba lo tafasta, if you grab something too much, if it's too many things, too lofty a thing, what happens when you don't get there? When you don't get there, you say, I can't do it, right? You say you can't do it, you throw it out, right? You're beaten down. So you're 100% right. It's definitely the work it's definitely the work of the evil inclination. There's no question. But a person has to be realistic, right? And the realistic aspect is never ever take on something that you won't be able, that you may think you
Way
can
out
do,
of range.
but yeah, it's out of range, right? It's way out of range. You have to be realistic, and you have to make realistic goals. Now the problem is, like, when it comes to learning, for instance, people want to learn everything. Well, that's great, but you got to start somewhere. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to learn all this, I'm going to learn all that. You got to start step by step, right? First you have to learn how to learn. Then once you learn how to learn, there are different levels, right? But I'll give an example. Even in my own life. So when I started learning, there's a lot of catch up I had to do, right? Learning Chumash, learning the Bible, learning Jewish law. Let's say when it came to the holidays and everyday life or whatever. So I took certain amount of time, at night, and I would go through different things, slowly. Slowly in the sense that, I had a certain amount I wanted to cover, and then, this is what I did for, a certain amount of time. Over time, you accomplish a lot more. I knew people that they would learn books of ethics one day a week for 15 minutes. Not every day, one day a week for 15 minutes, and they finish Path of the Just. They finished The Ways of the Righteous. Eventually they finished Shari Tshuva, The Gates of Repentance. It's possible that you say, what can I do in 15 minutes once a week? The evil inclination says, come on, that's nothing. So what happens? You don't do anything, right? So, in that sense, you got to make it realistic. And if you're not sure, you got to ask someone who knows what they're doing, is this realistic? I get someone a lot that, asks me all kinds of questions, let's say in Talmud. Person's never learned, right? He's never had anyone teach them. Doesn't matter if he's got it in English. He doesn't know the give and take. He doesn't know how it works. There are a lot of basics this person doesn't know. So it's important to learn Talmud. Certainly someone starting out, no question, for a Jew. No question. But at the same time, you got to learn by somebody who knows how to teach, who knows how to give over the basics, right? Then once you understand, first you have to understand, what they're saying. Then understanding what they're saying, you need the background. Why did they say it? What is it referring to? There are a lot of different levels. There's a basic level, and then there are other levels. Hey, I know something over here. I know another source. I know this. So, how does this fit in? Right? And that's where the commentaries come in. They, ask all kinds of contradictions and whatever. And how do we hold according to Jewish law? And what, if you know Jewish law and you come and learn Talmud, you say, hey, there's a statement in Talmud like this. There's a disagreement like this. How come Jewish laws are like this? Right? But it's kind of learning backwards. Right? In other words, it's kind of like you're looking at the end product, right? You're looking at the end product and you say, okay, how do we get to this end product? Right? But forget about the end product. You're doing it backwards. First, I have to see where it starts. First, you have to see what the argument is. Then you have to see how we hold. You have to see, what's, how it, what the bottom line is in Jewish law. What is there a disagreement? There isn't disagreement. How does it come out? You can't learn it backwards. Right? And there are people that learn it backwards. Right? And that is much more difficult to do. So, there are a lot of things that the evil inclination, works hard in trying to destroy us. At the same time, person has to have patience. And we are in a, fast food generation.
Oh,
I have no patience. I want it now. I want to understand Kabbalah now. You're not going to understand Kabbalah now.
Download
right?
it.
You have to take it very, very slow. Now, there are certain things you can do quicker, right? And, in different ways. You have to know how to do it. That's why it's so important to have a mentor to be able to guide you, to be able to, I saw, I'm going to actually mention this in my Q&A this week. I saw someone who was basically bashing, other rabbis that are, could be qualified as heretics, let's say, sort of on the fringe I'll be generous. Sort of on the fringe. This person, every time you heard him speak Hebrew, butchered it. Butchered. I mean, when I say butchered, I mean, you show this video to anybody, any from person gonna laugh. But this guy's going on saying this guy's a heretic and this one's a heretic, and then he quoted something. And then he quoted them, see, Shulchan Aruch says this, right? The Code of Jewish Law. The example that they gave was that all women, even if they are single, have to cover their hair. Now, that's only if you're married, right? If a Jew is married to another Jew, right, the woman has to cover her hair, right? We're not going to go into all the details. But there are sources that's true, right, by Sephardim, by Sephardic people, that even if they're not married, they cover their hair, right? Now, in the last 30 years, I don't think I've ever seen a Sephardic girl cover, I mean, not that I've come in contact with so many, but, with the amount of Sephardic girls I've seen in my life, they haven't covered their hair. They don't cover their hair, right? It's a minority opinion, right? First of all, this guy looks stupid, wasting his time saying these people are heretics. He can't pronounce Hebrew for his life. This guy, instead of making these videos, should be learning, right? Should have someone teaching him. Okay, that's a side point. You want to come out against heretics? It's a mitzvah to come out against heretics. Good, right? I'm not going to argue that point. But if you're going to quote something, understand the context, right? You're not going to quote something, a minority opinion is what some people do, because they don't know anything. They'll quote a minority opinion like this is the word of God, this is what you're supposed to do. And it's not true, right? Certainly, even if there are Sephardic women, Sephardic girls, right, that are not married, that do this, they are in the minority, big time, minority, right? I don't care what the source says. That's not how we hold, right? So you have to know Jewish law and what we do. Don't just quote something and say, yeah, but I saw this, and no. There's a context, right? That maybe that source maybe, I'm not saying the source isn't true, right? That the source doesn't hold that. Okay. That is true. That's what this source says. And it's a reliable source. But the question is, practically speaking, do we hold like this or not? I've had people quote the Rambam that Maimonides says, if I go in front of 3 kosher Jews that keep Shabbos, I can convert. Right? Now, it depends. It depends who these people are. It depends how the conversion's done, what the person knows. It depends on a lot of factors, right? But it's you have to see each case according to each case, right? If someone's got a drop of knowledge, I say a drop, and they say, look, this is what the Rambam says. Very good. Then, well, don't you hold what the Rambam says? A lot of times we do. But you have to know when. You have to know how. You have to know what case. Not every case we're going to say, oh, the Rambam says like this. We allow it across the board. Not true. Right? I asked someone much bigger than me about this. And he said it depends on the case. We don't want people to do it necessarily. Right? We don't want them to do it necessarily. But if they do it, the question is it valid? Is it going to be valid? Now, you can't say across the board it's not valid. Right? Not necessarily, but that's not what we want to do. So my answer was, if you're going to do it right. Make sure there are no doubts. Right? Don't just say, oh, the Rambam says this. It depends. You don't live in a Jewish community. Right? You want to go in a place that's going to be more accepted, that there are more Jews. They either don't convert, right? You and your wife don't convert, right? Or you have to move. And they weren't too happy because they were in China at the time. They ended up going back to the States. This guy was American, married to a Chinese woman. Okay, right? The process wasn't easy, but they weren't going to convert there. The only other place he could have gone is Hong Kong. He couldn't get a job there, different things. Okay, so you have to move. He said, but I like living in China. So I don't care you like living in China. It's a reality. There is a reality. Not going to just convert anyone because they say they want to convert, even if they're serious. By 3 Jews that are Shomer Shabbos. You live in a crummy community, right? You live in a small community. If that, there are no schools there, right? Okay, didn't have kids at the time, right? But you have no schools there. What are you going to do? So why would we say it should be good in such a place if you're going to have all kinds of issues, right? We're not interested in that. Okay, it's hard to move and you can't this. There are a lot of things. Good. right? But at the end of the day, there are things you just don't want to rely on, right? Certainly, if you don't have to in a place like this, it doesn't have a bigger community. If it doesn't have a bigger community, you gotta, my language, you gotta get out of Dodge. You get out of Dodge and you move. That's it. Could it be there'd be some rabbis out there that if the conversion was done that way, it'd be accepted? Could be, right? I'm not saying not, but the problem is you cannot quote something like you're an authority and we know nothing, right? It's sort of one of my pet peeves. Gets a little bit under my skin. People say things, quote things. I don't know what they're talking about. They have absolutely zero idea, what they're talking about. I had this stupid troll saying about, you really think, when the rabbis interpret this verse, 100 blessings, how many Orthodox Jews say 100 blessings a day? Right? So what was my simple answer? Well, if you say the Shemona Esrei, right, the Amidah, whatever you want to call it, there are 19 blessings during the day, right? During that prayer. 19 blessings. So if a guy prays 3 times a day, it doesn't apply to a woman. 19 times 3 is how much? Right? It's 57. 57. So you got other blessings you say in the morning, another 10, you got 67. Right? You're almost up to 70. Right? Now, let's say you eat bread, 4 blessings there. You're up to 74. You go to the bathroom how many times? You're almost up to 80. How many people? You sound like an idiot. How many people? How many Jews really hope I made 100 blessings? You know what the problem is? I'll just get to the point. The problem is on Shabbos. Right? On Shabbos, what do you have? The Shemona Esrei, even if you say 3 times, only 7 blessings. Because we don't petition God for our needs on Shabbos. Shows we have a lack of faith. That's going to be an issue. Right? That is going to be an issue because, okay, so if you say, 7, 7 twice, you got 14, you got 21, you got 30, you got 28, food and this. Okay, that you're going to have that you might have a little bit of an issue with. During the week, I was like, what's the problem? You just don't like the fact that they interpret it that way. Doesn't mean it's not true. 100% doesn't mean you just say, oh, that's stupid. I got someone on William Hall's video, right, say, yeah, okay, what you say makes a lot of sense. So I don't like this thing about kashrus. This thing about kashrus really bothers me. Because even though the Torah tells me you're not allowed to cook a calf in its mother's milk, right? Milk and meat. That makes sense. Right? Forget about whether you're allowed to get benefit from it, you're not. And all these other laws, milk and chicken, okay, it's rabbinical. That I don't like. Right? Let's make something clear. Right? Either you hold by the rabbis or you don't. Don't tell me I like Parmesan. This. Yeah, don't tell me I like this, but I don't like that. This makes more sense. This doesn't make as much sense. The rabbis wanted to develop prayer. Right? And the men of the Great Assembly we mentioned, some of them were prophets. Right? Some of them were actual prophets. You're going to argue with a prophet? The prophet says this is what God wants. You have to say this prayer 3 times a day. 19 blessings. Right? It was 18. They had another one. Whatever. They were, they weren't all men. They were prophets also. Okay, he's a guy. But everyone agrees they were prophets. Right? So, either you hold by the rabbis or you don't. But you cannot pick and choose. You cannot say, I like this, but I don't like that. Who gives you the right? Who gives you the right? The rabbis have the ability to interpret. You take everything they say. That's it. You don't like anything they say? Okay, you don't like anything they say. Right? But your translation is based on that. King David's Jewish because of them. But otherwise, you don't like to stand on. Right? To the point, the point is you can't just do what I want. You can't just do what you think. Right? This guy's quoting this whole thing and say, look, Shulchan Aruch says like this, Code of Jewish Law says like this, all Sephardic women, right? All women should cover their hair, even if they're not married. Isn't that statement true? Yeah, that's what it says. Do we hold exactly everything, that's brought down? No, we don't. How do you know? How do you pick and choose? Because that's what you got great rabbis for, right? They'll tell you that there's certain things the Chofetz Chaim brought down, let's say, in the laws of Shabbos and other places. Now, the customs aren't like that. Question is, why not? Right? Custom change for, whatever reason. Doesn't matter. But not, I would say 95%, 98%, what he says we do. Right? And we keep. Don't tell me, oh, you really think they meant this? You don't hold by them. You want to troll, go troll. Right? But at the end of the day, either you tell me I don't hold by them, or that's it. right? If you hold by them, you hold by them. Things that you don't understand or don't make less sense, do I, as a Jew, do I have to keep it? I still have to keep it, even if it doesn't make sense to me, because that's what the Torah tells me, right? I have to listen to them. That's it. So let's see if we can finish up this Mishnah here. We got one other. This is pretty long.
If I am for myself, what am I?
Yeah. So what does that mean? So it means the person can't properly serve God if they're not part of a community, right? So the acquisition of spirituality is dependent on the community, says the Rambam. Says the Rambam that one of the 24 things stops the person from repentance, separates himself from the community. How many times have people said, why do I have to live amongst Jews, to convert? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah or the Talmud or according to Jewish law. You're right, it doesn't say that. So what? So why the rabbis have to add on to that? Because if you live in the middle of nowhere, and you're converted, and then what do you do about Shabbos? What do you do about prayer? Right? You can't get to synagogue. Right? You separate yourself from the community. It's very, very important. People come to pray as a community. You can't live 4 hours away from a community and say you should convert me. Right? A person has to be part of the Jewish people. You can't just do what you want, right? You can't just say, wow, I'm going to do this anyway, and who cares? Comes along the Ma'or V'Shemesh, written more than 200 years ago, and he brings down the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim. Parshas Kedoshim, book of Leviticus, chapter 19. What does he tell us? It says, don't make the mistake, think that if a person alone is going to attain holiness. Why? Torah tells me, be holy. Plural. It says Kedoshim, not Kadosh. Right? It says that you, the Jewish people, should be holy, because the greatness of the Jewish people is the fact they have a connection to a community. Right? And being part of the Jewish community isn't crucial to serve God. Yeah, question.
Well, Rabbi, I'm just wondering if you've got any insight to really bring this around for, say, the Noahide communities. I mean, we're just growing. A lot of us are so isolated. We're looking, we're hoping, we're believing, we're connecting. Numbers are getting joined. People are meeting new people. We're really trying, but it's this point of the necessity with that you just mentioned being plural. Really something we need to grow with.
So a non-Jew doesn't have an obligation to live in walking distance,
but there is a benefit.
Oh, there's certainly a benefit, right? There should be, any non-Jew, right, should be within striking distance of a Jewish community, right? Striking distance, at least, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, they should be within, they don't have to walk there. Doesn't matter, because they're not going to keep Shabbos or the festivals, but to have access to that, they should be within striking distance, right? It's hard enough to get people in one community, right? I mean, that would be the goal, to get 40, 50 people that can sustain, at least, can sustain like a learning center, in the community. I mean, that's on the books. We'll see if it ever gets off the ground, in different communities, right? But
I'm working towards it.
Yeah, so that's a tremendous, that'd be a tremendous thing. But for most people, some are in the Philippines, some are in China, some are in South America. They're all over the place, right? They're all over the place. Not everyone's going to have access to money, whatever, or even enough people, right? So what's the second best thing? Or we're not even going to call it second best, but it's not. But is doing something virtual, right? Is being connected, virtually. And I think that is tremendous. I think that's a tremendous thing. If you don't have, if you don't have anything else, if I could dedicate, 6-8 hours a day, which I can't, but, it's giving, classes around the clock, inspiring people on, and they understand what they have to do. That's certainly better than nothing. 100%. It's not, it's not the same as living in a community, right? I had somebody in Oklahoma wanted to build something. They figured if they built something, Jews are going to come. But I was like, that's not true, right? There is no community around. There are no schools there, right? There's going to be a lot more, it's going to be a lot more difficult to build it. It's kind of like Field of Dreams. You build it, they will come. But I did say But I did say that if you have a learning center, if someone, a few people have money, you can rent something, whatever. You have a learning center, you have people come there, a number of times a week. You do live streams, you bring someone in every so often. That's a whole different thing, right? But you have to have, enough people. Certainly, you have to have enough people to do it. It could be done. Definitely, it could be done. You don't need thousands of people, to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, having something like that is 10 times stronger, right? I definitely think it's 10 times stronger than doing things live stream. You see what Rod Bryant's done in Humboldt, Texas, right, with Nativ. So how many people they have there? I mean, we're not talking hundreds. We're definitely not talking hundreds. He told me a few years ago. I don't know, he got 50, 70. Sometimes for a class will get 20, 15, but it has to be consistent. You have to, I think what's really missing, and I think this is good for, for the Noahides, is you need someone who's a magnet. You need somebody who people are going to come flock to. Somebody who's real, right? Someone who has substance, not just, I see people, and what's attractive is this mushy-gushy type of stuff. They'll quote Kabbalistic texts, and they'll make people feel good. And they'll talk about, highfalutin in my language, highfalutin ideas that people, that they water down so people can understand. Why are you watering down Kabbalah for? Give them the real thing. I'm not saying Kabbalah is not the real thing, right? I see too many non-Jews involved that they don't have a clue. There's no possible way they can understand it, almost at a base level, even if it's watered down, because they're not a vessel. They haven't learned. I use this example once. I had somebody who was going to university. He was finishing up, he went to Hebrew University, finishing up his, quote unquote, his rabbinical degree. And he said, well, I'm taking a course in Kabbalah. So he said, well, if I'm going to be a heretic, I should know what I'm going to be a heretic about. So, normally at JTS where I learned, under the conservative movement, they learn about things. They never learn like the topic itself because no one knows how to learn. Right? A bunch of idiots there. Right? They don't know how to learn. They never learned anything in their lives, just about. Right? So comes along this guy and he says, well, at least I'm going to be a heretic. At least I should know what I'm being a heretic about. So I said, what? You're learning the history of Kabbalah? It's like, no. Learning about the 10 spiritual worlds, and different things. So he's like, well, so what do you think about that? So thinking quickly, I said, well, Madonna, we'll call it the famous Madonna, or Esther, as she calls herself, right? Madonna learns Kabbalah. So I said, if Madonna can learn Kabbalah, I said, you can also learn Kabbalah. So he started to laugh. He goes, oh, that's very funny. I was like, yeah, the problem is I wasn't joking. I said, she doesn't know anything about Kabbalah, doesn't know anything about Judaism. I said, you don't know very much either. So I said, let me give you an example. I'll give you an example. I said, if you want to study calculus, right, you need algebra and trig to get through calculus. So I said, what would happen if you just started learning calculus? He said, so the guy came back to me and says, oh, it's very simple. He said, if I don't have algebra and trig, I'm never going to understand anything. So I said, thank you very much. I said, you've never learned a tractate of Talmud in your life, never gone through Jewish philosophy, you never learned anything, right? Very little, if anything, and whatever you did learn is probably wrong. So I said, based on that, I said, you want to tell me you're learning Kabbalah? I said, come on. You've never gone through the basics, right? And on you all the more so, right? That's why it's so crucial. And, I can't emphasize this enough. We spoke about this, before, many weeks before. And we're going to speak about it next few weeks also about the importance of having a rabbi, somebody who knows what they're doing and can mentor and can give over information the way a person needs to hear it. Sure, I could speak for the next 2 hours easy, on things that no one would understand. What would be the point? Right? That there are people who want to speak on a high level, whatever, totally lose people, show, what knowledge they have. What benefit is that? Right? There is no benefit. I give one example when I was in South America before all my books had come. So I had a bunch of families, right? A bunch of Jewish families. And I spoke in my broken Spanish. And I went to Hebrew. A lot of them understood Hebrew. And then from there, I went back, I went to English. I went back to Spanish. and whatever. Now, speaking about the coming out of Egypt, right? It was right before Passover, so I spoke a little bit, a few deep ideas about Passover, right? So now, how did any of these people get involved in Judaism? What was there in Santiago, Chile? A Kabbalah center, right? So how did they get involved? They got involved in Kabbalah. So at the end, this is like 2 hours, and we had dinner, we had something in the middle, whatever. So I asked people, or I told them at the end, I said, I just want everyone to know everything I said up until now had absolutely nothing to do with Kabbalah. I said, I want to show beyond the shadow of a doubt how deep Torah is without Kabbalah. I said, God should give you all a blessing. You should learn a lot and be able to learn that as well. It's another aspect of Torah, no question, right? But starting from the beginning, know that there are esoteric ideas that have nothing to do with Kabbalah. That you can bring out, deep ideas without losing people, and inspire them or whatever. What do people do with some of these ideas? So what if you know about, the spiritual worlds and, whatever, don't you understand every time I make a blessing, the effect that it has in the spiritual world, the effect that it has in the physical world, and how it comes back and how it's judged and all these different things. Yeah, okay. So that's, that does have to do with Kabbalah. That's also true, right? But, people get caught up in detail and they say, oh, it's not so interesting, right? Blessing, Shabbos, it's less esoteric, right? People would be very happy if I went off tangent and spoke about the end of days, right? If I would always speak about the end of days, a lot of the time, because that, former Christians, that's what's on their mind, and on all their verses and how you deal with it, and in the Tanakh, the writings, that's their main mitzvah. Good, but if you understand a little bit deeper about Shabbos, and you think, oh, does God, I'm surprised this messianic troll didn't come out and say, oh, you really think God cares you tear toilet paper? The rabbis have to make that up that you can't tear toilet paper. Well, you understand what Shabbos is? You understand what the Mishkan is, the tabernacle, right? They weren't allowed to do anything on Shabbos, that was done there. You know what the tabernacle was? That God's presence was there. We have no idea what that means, right? But the Jewish people saw, in the time of the temple, God's presence was there. They felt it. So I would think that if the Torah tells me, I have to keep Shabbos in the middle of building the Mishkan, the tabernacle, right? As Rashi says, there's a connection. And the connection is I can't do what I do building the Mishkan does not supersede Shabbos. Because the Torah already told me many times, right? I have to keep Shabbos. But don't you think destroying the Mishkan and what the Mishkan represents, don't you think there's something deep there that God would say, well, I care what you do, because if you don't, you're going to get the death penalty. You say, oh, that's the rabbis making it up. You can say whatever you want. It's a very deep concept, right? What the Mishkan represented is a very deep thing, right? Without getting into it and bringing sacrifices and what it meant, and Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, going into the Holy of Holies and dying, thinking that they were on the level and what they did and what was the sin, and all that. They wanted to be so close to God, but God said, Yesh Gvul. There's a limit to what you can do. You can't just do what you want. You can't make it up as you go along, so to speak. There are limits, right? There are rules. So you got to stick to, as we'll say, you got to stick to the playbook, right? You got to stick to exactly what, you got to stick to what the Torah says. Yeah.
Well, just thinking back about the Mishkan, in the wilderness there, when that presence moved is when they would pack it up and move the Mishkan and reset it up, and then the presence moved. So I think a lot of people need to understand that Hashem rules it all. And so when the presence that they were following for 40 years in the wilderness, when it moved, they had to pack it down and they had to reset it up, and it had to be done a certain way. And there was lessons being taught repetitively over and over and over and over.
And the other problem is that people do not want to be subservient, especially if it's inconvenient. Right. So, the Messianics will say that's how, we'll do what we do. We're going to listen to God. We're going to do exactly what God says. Okay. So you don't have any definitions. You don't have any parameters. You make it up as you go along. You pick and choose, okay. But you don't even understand, you don't understand the Aleph. You don't understand about creation and what the purpose of creation is and what the purpose of man. right? The bottom line is we're supposed to be slaves, right? God took us out of Egypt. He took us out of Egypt, and God had to teach us. We were a slave nation, right? So why He took us out of Egypt and made, God was our master. How'd they know how to serve a king? How in the world they know how to serve a king? They're in a desert, right? The fact that they went to Egypt, who did they serve? They served Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh was the king. God says to Moshe, I want you to grow up in Pharaoh's house. I want you to understand what kingship is. Because then, once you understand what kingship is in this world, then you can teach the Jewish people about me, about who the King of Kings is. Now, there's a very deep thing there, right? But a lot of the commentaries say that's exactly why they had to go there, because and Moshe Rabbeinu was right underneath Pharaoh's nose, right? But he had to learn and understand what a king is. Because if you don't understand what a king is, how are you going to serve the King of Kings? Yeah.
Rabbi, I just love how when Joseph was down in Egypt and the brothers came and then they brought Jacob himself, Israel was introduced to Pharaoh there. He was introduced. Right. And one of the first things Jacob said is that he had known evil all his days to Pharaoh. And, to actually have a dialogue with a functioning king, I sometimes imagine what it would be like to meet the Queen of England or something of that nature. But we
don't know. We don't know what kingship is. There is, a little bit of kingship, still left in the world. Let's say in Saudi Arabia, king wants to kill someone, he can do it. No checks and balances, right? But most, the monarchy is out the window, right? But the whole point, when we say the Shemona Esrei, the silent meditation, the Amidah, whatever you want to call it, we take, 3 steps backwards. Take 3 steps forward. It's how to approach a king. And how are they going to know how to approach a king if they didn't know what kingship was when they went to Pharaoh? Right? That's one of the explanations. There are myriad explanations of what they were doing, why specifically Egypt. Right? But that is certainly one of them. And who was the first king of the Jewish people? Was Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu was considered the first king. Right? And how did he have a list? Because they wanted to test him because they, certain things that he did. They were afraid of him, because he took the crown and put it on his head, right? The Medrash says. So some of the advisors were worried. They said, he thinks he's going to be king. So what they do? So they tested him. They put in one bowl. They put rubies and diamonds and whatever. Another bowl they put hot coals, right? So they said, okay, let's see what the child takes. If he takes the rubies and the diamonds, we know there's an issue over here. If he takes the coals, we know he's a kid. So what happened? Says the Medrash, he went to take the diamonds. Angel slapped his hand. He took the coals. Coals are very hot. What does a kid do when something's hot? Sticks it in his mouth. So he burnt his mouth, right? He had a lisp. That's why he didn't want to go speak in front of Pharaoh, right? Because he said, I have a lisp, right? He says, what are you worried about? It's embarrassing for me to go speak in front of him. He says, don't I have Aaron, your brother? I'll tell you, you speak, right? I'll tell you what to say and Aaron will speak. You won't have to be embarrassed, right? But otherwise, his cover would have been blown. They would have killed him. Right, they would have killed him on the spot because they would have seen that, he's got greater desires. There are a lot of things beyond, beneath the surface that, when you see it in the bigger picture, it makes a lot of sense, right? It gives you a lot more information. Obviously, that's why you need oral law. Gives you a lot more information about what's going on, because you could ask that question: why specifically Egypt? Why'd they go down there? You say, well, Abraham gets cursed by God, and he said he wants to know God's attributes. So what does he say? God says, you're going to go to a nation, not yours. You're going to be subjugated. I'm going to judge them. Well, if we know that's Egypt, so why is God going to judge them? Egypt's only doing what God wanted, right? Say, isn't there free will? Yeah, there's free will, right? Bottom line is they went beyond what they were supposed to do, and God punished them. And eventually God took away his free will for other, for different reasons. But there was a reason they had to go down there instead of anywhere else. So, when you look at the story and you look at a lot of things in the Torah itself, there are a million questions to ask. A million questions. I'm not even exaggerating. There are millions of questions. They say, okay, why this and not this? Why is this plural, not singular? Why, one place it says Torot. Plural. What do you mean plural? Right? Rashi on the spot says 2 Torahs. Right? Written Torah and oral Torah that were given to Moshe, Mount Sinai. But if you're a Karaite, what do you say? Oh, it's plural. Why? Well, you got to kind of come up with answers, parameters, etc.
Wow. Well, Rabbi, I mean, we're heading up to our time, but I mean, I always want to make sure that you feel comfortable moving on because you're the one teaching, and you're really getting into some great stuff. I so appreciate the time, and I so appreciate your willingness to share. Have you got any maybe words to wind it down for this week, and Hashem willing, maybe we can continue next week?
Yeah, we'll continue with this. Definitely, we're still in the middle of this Mishnah. Hopefully, we finish it, next week. One thing to keep in mind, we mentioned about, a person has to give their all, in learning after 120 years. God's not going to ask, how come you weren't like this person, right? He's going to ask, how come you weren't like what your potential was, right? And the whole thing about potential, and reaching potential, we'll speak, we've spoken about it before, definitely speak about it again. And if potential is limitless, we don't want to sit around. We want to be out there. We want to be learning. We want to be striving. We want to be growing, being the best that we can be. Because if not, resting on our laurels is, certainly not good. We want to grow, and even if it's a slow process, doesn't really matter, right? You want to take something you can chew. You want to work on it. You want to grow from it, and then you take it step by step. You don't bite off. You don't bite off more than you can chew.
Right on, right on. But I think he's clear, folks, that doing nothing can be stagnation, and stagnation gets you nowhere fast. But little by little, little by little, little by little, you can get to where your potential needs to be. And you need to hear it from learned rabbis and hear what they're teaching, especially to all you B'nai Noach out there. It means a lot for me to hear Rabbi Coffman share the ethics of the fathers with us because he's coming at it from an angle in ways even I've never heard, even though I've studied some of this stuff before. I heard it from other rabbis. To hear him share as it's been passed on, it's all in line. It's all in perfect harmony with what's been passed down all the way back to Sinai, and it's a joy. Rabbi, if you've got nothing more to say, we can tune out and
Okay.
hopefully get back together next week.
Yeah, next week sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Hashem willing. All right, folks. So till then, you can find Rabbi Coffman on his website, orthodoxconversion.com. You can find him on his social media, Facebook pages. You can find him on YouTube. Check him out. Share his material with other people. It's always a joy to hear great stuff. So until next week, folks, this is Dan and Rabbi Chaim Coffman signing out, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.